Welcome to The Lift, a podcast about the decisions, tools, and thinking shaping the next generation of RevOps teams. I'm your host, Mark Evans, and today we're talking about one of the most critical roles in SaaS, the CFO. As go-to-market strategies become more complex with usage-based pricing, PLG, and hybrid revenue models becoming the norm, finance leaders are building the systems, processes, and forecasts that guide the business forward. And few people understand the demands of that role better than today's guest. Ben Murray, known widely as the SaaS CFO, has become a trusted guide for finance leaders across the industry. And Ben just doesn't talk about SaaS finance. He's built a community and platform around helping CFOs lead with clarity and confidence. With over 25 years of experience in financing and FP&A, Ben has turned financial clarity into a competitive advantage for the companies he advises. If you're CFO rethinking your revenue architecture, this conversation with Ben, Nue CFO Brian Keare, and me will deliver great strategic and tactical insight. Welcome to the podcast, Ben.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate the intro. Great to be here.
You've built one of the most trusted communities and contact platforms for SaaS finance leaders. Let's go back and talk about what inspired you to start the SaaS CFO and how that journey has shaped your perspective on the role of the modern CFO, which obviously is a really interesting place to be right now, given the fact that the landscape is changing, if not every week, every day.
It's very cliched. It's all started in 2016. I started a blog to share my content, and I was a full-time CFO, and I came up through the ranks of FP&A in the airline software industries to SaaS CFO, founder of PE-backed companies. I was learning along the way, checking out content online just to see what I should be doing in these companies. I saw a lot of blogs and different things, and some of these sites really didn't share everything, didn't share the secrets or maybe the template. And I know in FP&A finance, it's like we rarely start from scratch. Usually don't build a forecast model from scratch. We like to use templates. So I thought, as I'm learning, I'll share the templates I'm creating, my forecast models, and share these online in blog posts. And that's how it started, and just slowly built up growth over time from there into the newsletter community that it is today.
It's interesting. Everyone talks, or at least in the marketing world, everyone talks about building community. And I think you've got 60,000 subscribers to your newsletter.
Yeah, up to 90 now.
Wow. I'm curious about that inflection point when you realize that you're gone beyond this little niche newsletter to the fact that it's gone broad-based and that you had a bigger and bigger audience. And curious about what you do to nurture that community, to build that community, because for many marketers, building an email list is pretty important these days.
Still so important, I think, just having that own media. But I think for me, it was always quality content and building trust with the audience. So if I'm going to put something out there, it's something that I believe in and I put research into it. So in the beginning, maybe I was only posting just maybe once every 2 months because I was busy as a CFO. For me, it was that pay it forward, put out content that could be immediately downloaded and used and not just fluffy stuff. So that was the whole genesis of it. And just to help the community. And I got lucky with SEO and niche SaaS terms that are quote unquote somewhat easy to rank for. And it just built over time organic traffic, posting to different communities, and then other strategies kick in to make it bigger from there.
That's really cool. What are people coming to you for? What kinds of things are people having questions about that they find that Ben has the answer to or can provide resources to? What's the hot buttons these days?
Oh boy. I guess if you say, yeah, Brian, hot button today, it's one is all, like a question comes up a lot is just what is ARR today? What's annual current revenue? What should I put in there? How should I calculate it? I've done a bunch of research on that. And also tech stack. I started a tech head of finance / CFO community, and tech is a big one. What should I look at? What should I do next? And there's so many new solutions coming on the market that now it's that referral network, talking to other CFOs. And then, Brian, the usual stuff, am I calculating retention correctly? Does CAC payback look right? So those traditional SaaS metrics. So it's all over the place, but ARR and tech have been some of those hot topics lately.
So how are CFOs currently looking at their tech stack? Is now the time to modernize it? Are people waiting to see how the AI revolution will pan out? Obviously, people cannot stop moving forward. They need to figure out how to keep their businesses moving forward. They don't want to be left behind. How are CFOs thinking about the tech stack today?
I think it's so important. The tech stack, you need that leverage in the back office, and you can't just do it with people. So I think now the conversation is shifting, and I've run a tech stack survey for the past 6 years. So see these trends changing, and about to launch my next one Q4. But before, like you had say in certain categories, incumbents, it's always this way in this software category, and
Yep.
now say in the ERP space, there's so many new players coming in funded and cutting that time to value down so quick. Say core accounting software, that who would have thought that's like a hot space right now? And now it's not hey, I can't go wrong going with this solution. They've been in the market 20, 30 years. Now it's maybe I should consider these AI native or AR first solutions who are built on the latest technology. So I think that mindset is shifting a bit from I can't go wrong with this vendor, but now maybe I should consider some of these new vendors.
Are you saying that if it was before, I don't want to make a decision that I could get fired by, so I'm going to go with a safe choice, that CFOs are now being a little less conservative and a little bit more aggressive or open-minded as they think about what's going to help power their companies in the future?
Exactly. No one ever got fired for hiring IBM or whatever.
Yep.
And now it's probably maybe I would get fired if I just went with that standard solution that everyone talks about all the time. And I didn't consider the new technology. And now I think CFOs, we have to embrace that new technology. We have to do the research to understand that this maybe could propel my function forward faster, thinking about what's coming, how that landscape is changing.
Yeah. So when you think about CFOs, I bucket them, and my bucket is probably too simplistic. But the buckets I think about are the ones that need to get accurate results at the end of the month and the quarter and get them up to their board, and they're focused on closing processes and giving accurate results to the management team. And then I think about a new brand of CFOs that want a more strategic seat at the management table, who are thinking about, like, how can I be a focal point for business systems and unlocking opportunities, unlocking profits, and go way beyond just the closing of the books and getting ARR calculations correct, things like that. Is that too simplistic, or how do you see that kind of dynamic playing out? How do you bucketize where CFOs sit in their roles in the company?
Brian, right now, I think that's a must have. If we're the CFO, we must have clean financial data. We close fast. We have good reporting, which is a piece of it. Now that's becoming more complicated, which we can talk about. But I came from the airline industry, which was very operational. We hear about, all right, strategic CFOs, operational CFOs, and that's just the way it was in the airline industry, where I could not be effective in FP&A if I did not understand the operations of that group, for example. And same thing in software. Now CFOs, right? I need to understand how do services operate? What's my go-to-market motion? And I can be more effective as a CFO then, and also help facilitate those discussions, enable investment, and also do better analysis, better forecasting. So I think that's just now expected from the CFO role.
Gotcha. So can we talk a little bit about pricing models in the SaaS world and the complexity there? In the olden days, it was, I have a direct sales team and they're going out and quoting, and I get the quotes in and I figure out how to go through the life cycle of my customer relationship with that. But when you layer on top of that, not even getting to modern AI, but you get to product-led growth, hybrid pricing, a user-based seat license might not actually be how we think about it in the future. So we're going to usage or consumption models. All that adds a whole bunch of complexity. What's the biggest challenge for CFOs in that respect in managing all that complexity that they're trying to drink out of the fire hydrant for?
It's hard. That's where what tech do you have in place that's important. And because you see an evolution of the tech stack where early in this transition from where, hey, we're just SaaS and we're subscription, and talk to a lot of people, hey, what should I use for subscription management, different things. But what's your go-to-market motion? Are you enterprise, closed one, have a CRM system? And because some systems were built, hey, we just handle enterprise. Then others were self-service, swipe a credit card. Now you're seeing just these systems evolve where they can handle so much more than that.
Yep.
So one is tech, but then, yeah, if you have PLG, SLG, all these different go-to-market motions, then we've got to make sure, all right, how are we bucketing this revenue? We've got to have clarity around that because that affects then our data architecture, because we can't mix, say, CAC payback on SLG with a PLG motion. So we've got to get very granular with that revenue data, the metadata attached to that, which creates different metric sets. It creates the logic of how I forecast revenue. So yeah, all these evolving pricing models have made things more complex, I'd say, in accounting, that we have to have now. We can't just say, yeah, here are the revenue streams. So we have to have so much data underneath those revenue streams.
So if I'm trying to get correct data, have the right systems, but I'm drinking out of the fire hose and I'm spending so much time managing integrations, getting the data correct. Data models are different across different systems. What's your advice if I come to you saying, I'm spending all my time doing that and I'm not spending enough time focusing on the real strategic levers of our business? Ben, what's your advice on how to manage that? What do you say?
One thing is, it's like, all right, what's the source of the data? Because when things, I find when they get complex, we're invoicing out of QBO. Oh, plus we have some Stripe invoices. Plus, oh yeah, by the way, we're using Bill.com, and we've got invoices in different systems. We've got monthly, annual subscriptions, maybe some usage revenue over here. And that makes it just so complex. So I think we've got to think about that data flow. I say, like the CFO utopia of quote to cash, thinking about how these systems are architected, how that data flows together, because we've got to be involved in that decision and how it's all flowing. And thinking about, well, normalizing these systems, bringing these systems together. Do we have subscription management in place? And so it gets to, I think, a bit tech, a bit data, because that's, I think, the foundation of it. Otherwise, it's just, yeah, it's very difficult to then pull these pieces together.
Yeah. Is solving that challenge outsourceable, or do I need to hire people internal who master that? Like, where's the balance? Because I might hire people internal, but they don't have the experience, or like, what's your advice there?
It depends. If you just happen to have someone on your team who's experienced with that, which is a huge plus. But it is, I'd say there are firms out there who will come in, assess tech stack, implement stuff for you, but you still need internal staff who are going to be the champions, who are going to own that system, who are going to understand it and take that on. And usually that, if you have a small team, usually that's going to follow the CFO as the champion, make sure their team is on board. So yeah, I think you can get help, but at the end of the day, like internally, we still have to own it, run it, understand it.
So if I think my pricing model is suboptimal, what's your advice on how I should be thinking about maybe working through a proposal that I can make to my management team, to my CEO, and what kind of systems do I need to support something like that? Do I wait for the CEO to hand it down? Should I be the one that's driving that?
On maybe pricing trouble or pricing model changes?
Yeah.
That's a common discussion I have with founders I help, is pricing. And generally, first at a high level, we look at what are the economics of the business. The big thing for me is, all right, revenue streams. We've got our
Yep.
COGS, we've got gross profit, we have margins by revenue stream, and having accurate calculations there to see, all right, what kind of margins are we running? Because say if we're a $10, $20 million business and we're running, say, 50% gross profit, okay, something is off here. Either, right, we've got a cost structure that's just not sustainable, or right, our price structure is just off, right? This maybe won't be a scalable, sustainable business if we don't increase prices. So first, for me, it starts at a high level of just the economics of each revenue stream. And then, because we know pricing is so complex, and then digging in, right? Do we have minimums? Do we have contracted minimums on usage? Different things that could just help with the revenue. So that's usually first, yeah, where I start.
Gotcha. And I don't know, in the divide between a SaaS company dealing with quoting on the one side and then invoicing on the other side, maybe rev rec, those are three core functions that I need to deal with. How do you think about stitching all those together? What are some of the pros and cons about how I as a CFO should be thinking about that?
I think that's the ideal solution when we can have those systems tied together, because we have the sales function and maybe they're sending that quote out. And then they're like, hey, we're ready to go. The contract goes out, it gets signed. All right, it gets signed. And then there's a wall there. Okay, take this contract, hand it to accounting, go do your stuff. But right, it's nice when we can tie those systems together where we have visibility upstream. And then when that's signed, right, the data flows into our accounting software, our subscription management software, and then it continues that life cycle from the quote to contract to invoice. And of course, invoicing is one thing, collecting cash, running RevRec, doing the reporting analytics, right? So there's a whole stream that has to happen. And that's where really important that CFOs are involved in that, because yeah, I'm not leading sales, but I have to understand what's going on, the data architecture, because all that's coming to me. And if you give me poor data, faulty data, I can't invoice that customer.
Yeah, totally. Is it a common problem? You think CFOs come to you and say, gosh, I got my invoicing and RevRec correct, but it actually doesn't. When I look at the sales funnel and I look upstream at what the opportunities are, that's not a really good source of truth. I'm having problems reconciling that and getting the analytics to go through to figure out really what my conversion rates are. And like the end of the funnel is fine and I got that sorted, but I've lost control over the beginning of the funnel.
Yeah, usually on the pipeline side, of course, yeah, we've got to know what's going on there. That helps with our forecast process. And that's where usually early stage is not very mature. Maybe no funnel points are defined. But I've been in FP&A where we've been tasked with, all right, go assess the pipeline, all the stages. Do we have data mismatches where we think this is right before closed one, but we don't have all the necessary information in the opportunities? So I think data quality is so good. And everybody talks about that, right? The data in the pipeline, that we can have the correct weighted averages, that we can have the correct forecast. So I think, yeah, CFOs are pushing up into that as well.
Me as CFO, what's best practices with respect to how I should be dealing with my CRO and partnering with them to get that funnel correct, to get the analytics correct, to make sure that when we come to the management meeting, I don't have one set of numbers and the CRO has a different set of numbers, and we spend half the meeting fighting about which one's correct.
Yeah, that's where, as a CFO, I spend a ton of time, most in sales and marketing. Yeah, and there are other webinars and podcasts about that relationship with CFOs and the CRO, VP of sales. But it's so important to have that great relationship, because say if I'm using Salesforce HubSpot, I am a user within Salesforce. I am pulling closed won data. I'm pulling pipeline data, and we have to be on the same page of, all right, what counts as an executed deal and what are the stages? Say, for example, like day 3 of close, I would pull my closed won report. I would go
Yep.
talk to the sales operations manager and, all right, what's your number? What's my number? All right, we tied to the penny. Perfect. We're good.
Well,
But even if
lucky if that happens.
even if we're $1,000 off, they would dig in and make sure, all right, it was this, maybe just a misconfigured opportunity or some weird product ID. But that's so important to report the same numbers, but it's usually just working together. And plus just having that relationship, we're trying to achieve the same result.
Yeah. So let's go back to you hinted at some of the analytics definition of ARR kind of things. Tell me where you think the best companies are. How do they define some of those metrics and how do they report on them correctly? And where do companies fall short? Where's the delta there?
So I've done a bunch of research on public companies and how they're defining ARR, both in subscription and variable pricing usage environments. And of course, not everyone discloses everything, but you're seeing a little bit of a trend where now these disclosures include great definitions of ARR because they feel this is a valuable investor metric. And that's one of their North Stars as ARR growth. And subscription, usually pretty easy, but some do it based on revenue. A common way is MRR times 12, other
Yep.
do a quarter times 4, and then defining the revenue streams that are within subscription. So that include true SaaS. Maybe there are some maintenance support agreements in there as well. And then usage, we want to take credit for usage revenue or an ARR. And again, one of the most common ways is they just take the trailing quarter times 4. So just annualizing that usage revenue and layering that on to their subscription ARR. So you're seeing a lot of good definition. And now with AI companies, now some companies are calling out this is AI ARR versus our total ARR because that's a big growth path for them. So they're really highlighting, really defining it in their disclosures. And that's a question that comes up a lot. And again, there are no standards here, but I think what I see in the CFO community is they want to make sure they're not creating some definition that's just way out in left field that they'll get questioned about. So it's looking at what those trends and then just what makes sense to the company that would give a third party an accurate ARR number.
Yeah. So what I heard you say is if you're taking usage consumption, for example, I've got a consistent pattern of usage and consumption. I can include that in my definition of ARR if it's predictable and repeatable. The key there is to create a definition and to communicate that definition clearly so people understand how you are calculating it. Did I hear you correctly on that?
Yeah, definitely, especially within private SaaS, just having in your materials, in your financial reporting, an appendix with how you're calculating metrics and say defining ARR so everybody is on the same page or they know. But yeah, just disclosing that, not hiding it, not how using some weird car number, contracted annual recurring revenue. So I think, yeah, just defining, disclosing, just make sure everybody's on board.
Great. What happens then if I feel like I've got a definition that meets what private investors come and the modern economy, subscription economy understands, and that might be different from what my auditors are telling me when I go time to talk to my auditors? How should I think about that?
I think ARR, because you write in this goes, this is non-GAAP, this will not tie to revenue. So we know ARR is non-GAAP, EBIT is non-GAAP. So I think it's still something that, yeah, I don't think you're going to get questioned from an audit perspective. Of course, look at revenue and RevRec, but I think on the ARR side, no standards there, non-GAAP. So that's why you see so many different definitions out there, but you do see a convergence.
Got it. Makes sense. So switching gears, can you give me some examples of what you think the companies that are really solving the customer lifecycle or revenue lifecycle, what they are actually doing, how they're constructing their teams, how they're thinking about their tech stack, how they're executing, how they're preparing for scalable, profitable growth? What are some common threads that you're seeing about the companies that are setting themselves up for success?
I think one, they know tech is a must-have. We can't do this anymore in spreadsheets. There are too many transactions, too many types of revenue streams, too many pricing models. And I think that's where, when there's so much new tech coming onto the market, and I think it's understanding, one, it's always like we've got to understand that our process, our data flow, and then looking at, all right, our use case, how does tech apply to that? What's the best tech to overlay on top of our process? So I think it's realizing you can't just manage your business with QuickBooks or Xero, that it takes, you slowly progress. Maybe you just start with QuickBooks and then maybe you do sales tax compliance, and that's, boy, we're growing and we need subscription management and we've got a CRM system. But I think the CFOs are recognizing, all right, before it gets too out of hand and we have all these disparate systems, we need some systems that will work together, that we can tie that life cycle, that revenue life cycle or revenue management together.
Gotcha. So let's see. And how should I be thinking about AI as CFO? What are the ways that you think I can leverage AI to really help my business and my processes? And where is it a bridge? Where is it a bridge too far? You listen to the podcast and you're talking about these people who are saying AI is going to replace your core systems of truth where you've got transactional records. And I'm scratching my head thinking like, oh, am I missing the train if I don't contemplate that? Versus that sounds pretty far-fetched from what we normally think of as our core record of truth that we can hang our hat on and that survives the audit. What's your advice on that front?
Yeah, I think AI, when you surveys and reports and this guy, oh yeah, 50% of companies are using AI in finance and all that stuff. But when I talk to CFOs, when I go to conferences, and when I was at the SaaS Metrics Summit earlier this year with a bunch of CFOs, and just, hey, raise your hand if you're actually using AI in the back office, and almost no one raises their hand. So it's still in that beginning phase. Yeah, we know we can use it to enhance things or speed up analysis, but the big thing is like, how can we make that repeatable? No, it gives different answers, different times, different formats. And so you see it some on the analysis side, But again, how can we make that part of our everyday workflow? And then, of course, in accounting solutions, maybe identifying fraud, misposted transactions. But you're right, like we're probably not at that level yet where we can just have, say, agentic AI making postings for us without still a person reviewing that. And that's the big debate is when will that come into play? But we're still out there. I think, say, FP&A and forecasting, it can help, but in that core general ledger, yeah, there probably still will be this review process to make sure. And I just had the discussion of like, all right, RevRec, AI doing all your RevRec, that's great, but it can't be a black box. First, it's got to document how it's performing the RevRec. So you agree with it. So you can go with that. Check, the auditors will want to know that. So there's just that progression. I think that documentation part of it.
Yeah. The answer is, I don't know. ChatGPT gave me this revenue schedule is probably a little suboptimal in that front, right?
Yeah, that's where you see some things like, oh, look at ChatGPT. It created this cool cohort analysis. I think in the finance function, right, we still need to know the basics of what we're doing, right? We can't just cover up skill gaps with AI and not understand just core, like how is retention calculated or how were these MRR schedules calculated, and just completely blindly believe in what AI is producing.
Yep. So let's just pull on the thread of analytics, and I heard you say that AI might be involved there. I've got too many sources of truth coming from too many different places. I've been in this business long enough. When the rubber hits the road, Excel is my friend, and I'm doing a ton of data massaging, reporting, management using a ton of Excel spreadsheets. I come talk to you and say, I think I'm leaning too much on that. I think I might be missing the boat. How do I up level my stack so that I can have modern analytics in a way that isn't going to require a huge investment and having to coordinate with my IT team and just get something stuck in a bad ROI investment in analytics? How do I think about that?
Yeah, I think with, say, FP&A and analytics and AI helping with that, I think it comes back to your data, like it's data structure, because and I've got this basic FP&A course and say, all right, I spend a lot of time with this prompt that can write variance analysis, but it's only as good as that data structure, actual versus budget. How are the general ledger accounts set up? How much detail do we have there? So that's where, and it's so funny, like we've always talked about data for years, like data is so important, but so cliched, but it is. If I want to let AI loose on analysis or variance analysis and just take away that pain of writing variance comments, which is the rite of passage for FP&A, like it's going to come back to clean data structure, and then maybe underlying, like, all right, it now needs access to GL transaction data underneath that to write an even better variance comment. So I think it's gonna again push the focus back on data, because if you just let AI loose on just some generic chart of accounts and that structure, it's not going to give you anything better.
So what I'm hearing you saying is, if as a CFO, you better know your data. If you've got complex data sources, you need to get a handle on that. And the better the data model and understanding of the data structure is, that's a prerequisite for being able to build on top of that effective analytics.
Yeah, I'm seeing examples now, and say just revenue schedules and MRR schedules that, all right, a revenue variance, a product A was higher or lower, but okay, it can then access the MRR schedule and it can say these customers churned or these customers upgraded. So again, it's that tie-in of the data from the high level down to the source data, will make a big difference.
Great. So let me just ask one more question. What's your parting thought for a CFO of a SaaS company that is feeling like they're drinking out of a fire hose and dealing with a bunch of these things that you commonly see? Like, what's your key piece of advice? How do you prioritize? Where do you start? Give me some things to really tangibly work on over the next day or two.
So I think CFOs can overextend themselves because we want to be operational. We want to get in the operations. What's going on with sales? What's the services? Why is our backlog so high? But then I was thinking, I've done that myself. It's like, all right, I've got to retrench back to finance and accounting, or retreat back to finance and accounting. I've got to still run my group. I still have to pay employees. I have to pay vendors. That has to happen. I have to close the books. So before we get fancy or sophisticated, right, it's still core accounting, close the books on time, material. Are we doing a good job there? Are we paying employees, vendors? Are we processing expense reports? And then we build from there. All right, build out our FP&A, build our forecasting process. And in that, we can assess people, process, data, and tech in each of those steps. And I look at those 4 pillars and think, all right, my close process. Do I have the right tech in place? Do I have the people? Do I have the process? Do I have a close checklist? So again, for me, it comes back to fundamental principles, processes, and we build out from there, because we can't lose sight as a CFO. We want to help all these other departments, but still, we've got to make sure the company's running behind the scenes.
Yeah, that jives with my mantra, which has always been, you got to have all the legs of the stool. You need to have people, you need to have processes, you need to have the systems, and you need to have the good data. And you miss one of those legs of the stool and you're pretty wobbly.
Ben, Brian, this has been an amazing conversation. I feel like I'm attending a tennis match and watching 2 masters go back and forth, and I get to be the spectator. As a podcast host, I love it when I don't have to do any work in the process. I've learned a lot. Really enjoyed the back and forth and getting into the nitty-gritty of SaaS and being a CFO. Thanks so much for joining us. Where can people learn more about you and what you do?
If they want to learn more or find me online, I have my blog that I started in 2016, SaaSCFO.com. I have tons of resources, templates for everyone to use in SaaS finance.
If you found this conversation valuable, we'd love your support. Be sure to subscribe to The Lift wherever you get your podcast. And please leave us a 5-star rating and a quick review. If your company is rethinking how to connect quoting, billing, and product-led growth, or if you're tired of stitching systems together, head over to Nue.io and learn how we're helping RevOps scale and finance teams with clarity and speed. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.